We've been going through the book of Nehemiah, looking at how Nehemiah organized the people of Jerusalem after the exile in Babylon to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. And in this 4th chapter, we discover that there are 4 things that you will face when you're building your legacy. I guarantee you're going to face them. I guarantee you they're going to cause you trouble. But the nice thing about this chapter is Nehemiah also tells us how to face these things and chase them down. So let's look at the 4 things you'll face when building your legacy, whether you're building your own legacy for God or whether we're doing it together as a church. The first thing that we'll face when we're trying to build a legacy is we will face ridicule. When Sanballat heard we were rebuilding the wall, he exploded in anger, vilifying the Jews. One of my favorite theologians, Warren Wiersbe, writes, "When the enemy laughs, it's often a sign of God's blessing." If you're facing ridicule for what you're trying to do, you're probably doing the right thing. Because if you're not doing anything important, nobody's going to care. They'll get all in your face and say, "You can't do that. You're too old. You're too poor. You're not strong enough. You don't have the resources. You haven't thought this through. What's the matter with you? Are you crazy?" We're going to get ridiculed for the things that we try and do around here. Because, I hate to tell you, this church is not full of spring chickens. They're going to say, "You can't do nothing. You're a bunch of old guys and gals." And then they're going to say, "Well, you can't do that. You're just too poor. We don't have enough money around here to do those kind of things." The church that I served in Folsom, California, had 2 billionaires in the congregation. Not millionaires, billionaires. We've already done a whole lot more than they have, because it ain't about money. It's about God. And there's 3 kinds of ridicule that you're going to face. First, they'll laugh at the workers. "You're too old, you're too poor, you're too weak, you're too whatever." What are these miserable Jews doing? Do they think they can get everything back to normal overnight? The second thing they're going to ridicule is they're going to laugh at the materials. "You can't do nothing with that church. Heck, it's 50 years old. That building's falling apart. Got to replace all your air conditioners. You can't do anything over there. It's just not going to work." And finally, they'll laugh at the work. That's right. What do they think they're building? Why, if a fox climbed that wall, it would fall to pieces under his weight. That's the stupidest project I ever seen. What good is that going to do for the community? Why would you waste all your time and energy doing that? You see, the thing is that ridicule is always going to happen, especially when you're trying to do something for God. Because there's all kinds of forces out there that don't want to see God survive. Don't want to see God triumph. Don't want to see God thrive. Well, we're going to face ridicule either as a church or individually as we try to build our legacy. And Nehemiah tells us that if we do and when we do, we need to face it with prayer. Nehemiah prayed, "Oh, listen to us, dear God." I got to tell you that prayer's getting kind of a bad rap nowadays, especially in the media. Everybody's always giving trouble to anybody who says, "Well, our thoughts and prayers are with you." And then some commentator on the news will say, "Well, thoughts and prayers don't do nothing." Oh, yeah? I'm sure I've told you this story before, but when I was in junior high school, there was a girl at my church who was in high school. Her name was Gail Lamb. This was in the early 70s, and Gail contracted leukemia. And UC Davis Med Center at that time was trying a cutting-edge leukemia treatment. And they said that Gail was the perfect candidate, but she was only the second individual ever to receive this treatment, and it didn't work on the first one. But Gail was in such bad shape that they convinced her parents that she needed to try this therapy. Now, the surgery was on a Friday morning, and on the Thursday night before, my home church, Fair Oaks Presbyterian Church, decided we need to get together the night before and pray for her. And we were going to have a prayer meeting at 7 p.m. at my church, and we figured we'd pray for about an hour. We finally kicked everybody out after midnight. It was the most amazing prayer experience I've ever had in my life. And Gail Lamb had that surgery the next day, and her leukemia was cured. It was amazing. Don't ever let me tell you that, or anybody tell you that prayers don't do nothing. Now, the tragedy was that because this therapy was so new, basically what they did is they killed all of her white blood cells and then they gave her some new ones. But they hadn't thought all the way through the process, and they didn't isolate her enough, and essentially she caught chicken pox from a kid a couple of doors down and died from chicken pox. But the leukemia didn't get her. We should have been praying for chicken pox. Prayer works. Don't let them tell you that thoughts and prayers don't matter, because they do. When you face ridicule, and you will, face it with prayer. The second thing that you're going to face when you try to build your legacy, or when we try to build a legacy around here, is we're going to face intimidation. Then Sanballat heard that the repairs of the walls of Jerusalem were going so well, they were absolutely furious. They put their heads together and decided to fight against Jerusalem and create as much trouble as they could. Anytime you do something good for God, or try to begin to do something good for God, you're going to face intimidation. There's going to be people who do not want to see you succeed. Well, when Nehemiah faced intimidation, he faced it by redoubling his efforts. We need to redouble our efforts. We need to pray that much more. We countered with prayer to our God and set around the clock guard against them. It's always good to have some guards while you're praying, especially if somebody's out to get you. You will face ridicule and you will face intimidation. Prayer and redoubling your prayer efforts are how we face those first two. The third one you're going to face is you're going to face discouragement. But soon word was going around Judah, the builders are pooped, the rubbish piles up, we're in over our heads, we can't build this wall. We're never going to do it, we can't raise enough money. We're all old and we're just tired. We can't do it anymore. The good news is the gossip is always worse than the reality. And you know that to be true. That telephone chain game you used to play when you're junior high school, it starts out Johnny has the flu and it ends up Susie has terminal cancer. The gossip is always worse than the reality. And the way that we need to face it when we come up against this kind of discouragement is we need to face it with a clear view of reality. It's too easy to get caught up in the gossip tree. It's too easy to get in the middle of it and go, oh, we're all going to die. Sometimes we just need to take a step back and look at the reality of the situation and see what God is doing in our lives and in our church. Because when we get a clear view of how God is working, then we'll get a clear view. After looking things over, I stood up and spoke. After looking things over, when you get discouraged, don't just sit in your room with the lights turned off and the curtains closed and the door shut going, ah. Get your little tush outside and make sure you see what's actually happening in the world. Make sure you see what's actually happening at our church. Make sure you see how God is actually working in your life. They were just on vacation for a minute. It's in their contract. You're going to face discouragement. You're going to face intimidation. You're going to face ridicule. And finally, and perhaps worsely, you're going to face fear. You're going to face fear. But Nehemiah says to all of his builders and his troops and their families, don't be afraid of them. Put your minds on the master. Life throws us scary things. And it's too easy to just be afraid because fear is easy. When we're faced with fear, we need to face it back by focusing on God. Our enemies learned that we knew all about their plan and that God had frustrated it, and we went back to work on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, the solution for 98.375% of the issues we face in life is focusing on God. Because there's too many people out there that want to derail us. There's too many folks out there who are rooting against us. There's too many folks who think we can't do it. Well, I got news for them. We can't do it. But God can. And God is with us. Anyone who takes half a minute and looks real close at what's going on in this church realizes that God is with us. Because we ain't a bunch of spring chickens around here, and we're still doing some amazing things in this community. It ain't because of your athletic prowess. It's because of the power of God. Don't be discouraged. Don't be intimidated. Don't let ridicule get you down, and don't be afraid. Because the Creator of the universe, the Savior of humanity, the Spirit of God who lives and reigns within us is with you.